Good morning, everyone. It's Nancy Narden of Smart Selling Tools, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. I am pleased to have with me today Estelle Hayes, and she is our Senior Manager of Customer Marketing, but you have Customer Storytelling in your title. Estelle, tell me more about what that storytelling title is in your profile.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that, Nancy. I've been in customer marketing, traditional customer marketing for about 5.5 years now. And as I've come to understand my role there, I see it divided up into two pillars. And there's the customer storytelling angle, and then there's the reference selling and the reference management piece of a traditional customer marketing role. And so um, the customer storytelling piece of it is what comes out of the customer nurturing process, if you will. So that's kind of where the creative, really fun stuff comes from, when we're able to tell our customers' stories publicly. And that really usually only comes after nurturing those customers and turning them into solid references for us. So
Okay.
it's the final step in the reference journey. That's how I see it.
Gotcha. And that's the ultimate goal, is to be able to tell the customer story in a
Right.
way that, resonates with your audience and um, also helps showcase the customer, which I'm
That's
sure
right.
they enjoy as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, really, is this whole concept of reference management, voice of the customer, customer storytelling, and how and why it's important, why you decided you need to have a formalized program, the solution you're using to manage it, and all of those good things.
Sure.
Before we start, let me ask you to tell us a little bit about your background and your role and the organization that you're serving in.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Um, so like I mentioned, I've been in customer marketing for about 5.5 years, which was a pivot. I was traditionally from corporate communications. So, overlapping worlds, but a bit of a pivot when I moved into the marketing organization at what was called Pivotal at the time. We were a software startup. Um, and we went public back to about 2.5 years ago. And then just about 6 months ago, were acquired by our former parent company. We were actually a spin out. We were spun out of VMware many, many years ago to become our own independent startup.
Huh.
So VMware has always been a sister company of ours. We're all a part of the Dell Technologies family of companies, but
Okay,
VMware acquired us back December 31st of last year. So we're
great.
back in the fold, and part of a much larger organization. And our business unit is called the Modern Applications Business Unit. And so we are very much still operating as we were as Pivotal, but part of a much larger company now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And we talked about your role already a little bit, but let me ask you about where and when did the initiative for having a voice of the customer or customer reference management program
Mhm.
originate, and what was the catalyst?
Right. So I came on after the program had been started. So credit to the woman who hired me, who launched it prior to me joining. And I think that she had a very progressive view on how important it was to nurture references and have that voice of the customer. A lot of times in startups, it can take many years to develop a reference program. However, reference selling was really baked into the core of our field. And that probably came out of our roots of being part of VMware, which is also very much a reference selling organization. And so takes a long time to close large enterprise software deals, up to 18 months sometimes. And so the way that we do that is through references. And so a prospect speaking to a happy existing customer is crucial. So having that reference call is so important. Having some case studies that a sales manager can share, having a video, quotes, all of those reference materials along the sales cycle are so important to keeping the conversation going and reassuring large, in our case, very large enterprise companies that they're going to make a huge investment in a piece of our software, they need to know that their peers, their competitors, other folks that are facing very similar business challenges to them are also trusting us,
Mm-hmm.
with our software. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And so let's think back before you had that program. I know that you didn't start it, but you probably
Right.
know the history of it. And typically companies have some problems or challenges they're trying to solve when they decide to deploy technology or processes, right?
Hmm.
So what did it look like before there was a reference management program at Pivotal? What were some of the challenges?
Yeah. Well, some of the challenges, which most people can imagine, if in the absence of a formalized program, the field is going to do what they need to do to further their selling motion. And so just because there wasn't a program in place doesn't mean that reference calls were not happening, and that marketing assets were not being shared. However, it means it wasn't being tracked formally anywhere. And that the biggest risk is leading to burnout with a customer, even if it's not an official reference customer. If we have one happy customer that's willing to take all the calls, but nobody's really monitoring how many calls are happening and how many requests are going out to that customer and how many different people throughout the organization are asking for, oh, can your CIO speak at our event? Can you do this case study? Can you, provide a quote for this press release? Can you take 5 reference calls this month? And eventually that leads to frustration and burnout and resentment on the case of the customers, part of the
Yeah.
customer. And so that's the risky piece of not monitoring these activities.
That makes sense. And
Yeah.
it's a lot of time on a sales rep's behalf as well to try to coordinate or figure out, hey, who would be a good reference for this particular account?
Right.
Um, and they're probably getting references from their sales rep colleagues' territory,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's got to have some friction as well.
Right.
So I can see there'd be a lot of challenges when you don't have a formal program and you can't. The most severe would be, I would think, the risk to harming the relationship with your
Right.
customer. That's
Exactly.
something you definitely don't want to do. Let's talk about, you have deployed a technology. It's point of reference. It's
Mm-hmm.
called ReferenceEdge, I believe.
Correct.
And so how has Reference Edge helped you to solve some of those pain points?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, we've been using Reference Edge since the start of our reference program, and certainly since I came on. And I think one of the best things about it for our field is that those reference calls, those are managed peer to peer. So me as a reference manager, I don't have to go in and field a request from a rep for another rep to provide a reference, right? They are going into that program and they are using it themselves, and they are finding their ideal reference. They're reaching out to that rep with a very simple form, requesting it, and that rep declines it or accepts it. And all of that kind of magic happens between the reps, and I don't have to touch it. I see it when I run a report. I can, if I choose to do that once a week or once a month or, whatever it is, I can see when those activities are happening. Um, and at the time, we no longer have this program, but we used to reward our reps with prizes and points that they could turn into prizes. So
Okay.
there was some financial incentive for them to participate in the reference program. And so if, they were able to track their own progress, but basically that's a very low touch piece for me that I knew was happening behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And I didn't have to worry about. So it was really nice.
Well, how do you then make sure that a customer isn't contacted too often if it's so hands off?
Yeah. So there are levers you can put in place that Reference Edge provides. So you can kind of see if a customer is in the yellow zone. Maybe they've taken, and you can set that in advance. Maybe it's 3 calls a month or whatever it is. You can decide. Me as the reference manager can decide what that threshold is, and then it also provides both reps a visual right away to see, okay, well, this is a customer that's in the red zone. They're not available for references right now, so I'm not even going to ask. Or if I ask, I'm not going to be surprised when the rep says nope. Talk to me in a month or two. Maybe then we can reapproach. Or you can see right away that they're green and they're great. They're good to go. So there shouldn't be any reason, if there's a good match there shouldn't be any reason for this reference call not to happen.
So that eliminates a lot of the chaos that probably took place before, where now you have standards in place and it's very clear which accounts and which particular customers have been used for different things. Or do you track whether they've participated in a call, or whether they've been on spoken at an event, or because there's lots of different types of reference activities, right?
Yes. Yeah. And those are manually tracked. And so, anything that's not either a site visit, which these days we're not doing any site visits anymore, but reference calls and site visits were all handled, without me being involved, which is really nice. All the other traditional customer marketing activities are tracked manually. So we go into what's called a workspace. And if I know that I'm approaching a customer maybe for a case study, a different customer for a video, a different customer for speaking at an event, I go in and attach that ask to that customer, which is great. And it interfaces with Salesforce, because that's what we use to track all of our activities. So ReferenceEdge is a native app and it sits right on top of Salesforce. So what's nice about that is that if I left tomorrow, all of those activities are still attached to those accounts. And whoever takes my place could go in and say, oh, look, we've got 50 customers with 50 different requests out to them for marketing activities. They can go in and see the notes and see where we are in process with those asks. Mm-hmm. And then once they're completed, that automatically gets updated to ReferenceEdge. But even more importantly, it gets updated to Salesforce. And so forever, that activity is attached to that Salesforce instance for us. So we can track it as a reference manager. I can track it, but then anyone else throughout the company who doesn't, because not everybody needs access to ReferenceEdge. The reps do, sales reps do, but executives do not. All sorts of people don't need that, but they can go into Salesforce and pull up a customer and say, oh, well, look, they've taken 20 reference calls over the years. They've done a case study. We've got maybe a press release in progress with them. All of that data stays with that customer file forever.
That's great.
Yeah.
How do you measure success of your reference program? And are you able to tie back revenue or closed won deals with references?
We could, and that's that's a great question. I mean, tying revenue and closed deals to reference activities would be the ultimate goal. We're not there yet as a company. I'd say that's something we would like to do, and see how can we connect the dots to, when does a reference material touch a prospect? And we can do that. I don't know that we've necessarily done the work that would be needed to say, yep, and that turned, we could say it contributed, but I don't know that we'd ever be able to get to a point where we'd say, like, that made the difference.
Sure. Yeah. I would imagine though that you could say for the however many deals we won, X% used a reference.
Yes, great point. Yeah.
And then maybe you could even get a correlation to say, well, for X% of deals we lost, we did not have a reference.
Right.
And really know that the reference program is working for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I'm taking a note of that, because that's something I need to follow up on.
Good.
That's great. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see, what else did I wanted to ask you. We talked about some of the ways that you're using technology to help you with your telling your customer stories and making use of happy customers to help with the pipeline. What feedback have you gotten? Because here's the thing: is sales reps are a tough audience. I suppose sales leaders are as well. But when you buy and invest in technology, you really want sellers to use it. right.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of feedback have you gotten from salespeople?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of feedback I get from the reps, or lack of feedback, and I will just interpret that, reps are busy, right? They are always busy, and their priority are their prospects and their existing customers and nurturing those customers. And so I am very aware that when I ask them to learn how to use a new tool or add a step to their process, it's a big ask for them. And so as I'm always focused on, how can I make this as easy and simple, break it down to, this is going to take you 60 seconds if you fill out this form. And like it, as an example, with ReferenceEdge, we have a form for a rep to nominate their customer as a reference customer. And so wherever we are promoting those or educating the field on how to do this, I'm always emphasizing, this will take you 60 seconds. There are 4 steps in this form. And to remind them that yes, I'm asking you to do another thing. It will take a minute out of your day, or 2 minutes out of your day, or whatever it is. And then I follow that up with, and it's the right thing to do, right? Because here's what it gets you. The more references we have, the better off your future selling is going to be. And that motivation is going to be different for every rep. But I try to emphasize that we're making this as easy as we can for you. You are helping your colleagues and you're helping yourself if we're all going into it with this mindset.
Yeah.
And then in the past, when we were able to incentivize and reward our reps for some of those activities, that was extremely successful. And every rep is different. They're not all going to be motivated by a new pair of Bose headsets, but
Right.
but some are. Some were very motivated by the extra prizes that they would accumulate points, and then we could turn those into some rewards for them, which was fun. Some of those competitions are fun too, between the field, and sometimes that's a way to do it too, is like a short term, who can get the most references, turned over in a X amount of time or what have you. So
Keeps it interesting in the
yeah,
meantime.
yeah.
Well, let me ask you uh, I don't know, a different kind of a question, which is, what if someone came in today and said, you can't use Reference Edge anymore? We're going to
Mm-hmm.
take this tool away from you. How would your life
Yeah,
change?
yeah. I'd be very sad. First of all, our ReferenceEdge rep is amazing. I was just on the phone with her this morning. We speak every other week. She holds our hand through everything, and is available to us what feels like 24/7. I would never call her in the middle of the night, but I would miss that relationship and that level of customer service, really. But then the idea of manually tracking a reference program is just a nightmare. I mean, I can't imagine not having a formalized program and a way to track our references. And I know people do it on Excel spreadsheets. I've talked to my peers at other companies, and at the time other startups, and it's unmanageable at a certain, that's not scalable. So it's not an option not to have a way to track these things, and not to have a way that have it connected so seamlessly with Salesforce as well. That's really key.
Well, sorry to have made you imagine a nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
Last question I'm going to ask is, what aspects of using Reference Edge or technology to help you with this, in this case it's
Mm-hmm.
Reference Edge, what aspect do you value the most?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I know I already mentioned, like, a couple of things I value most about working with ReferenceEdge is the seamless, the peer-to-peer references, the things that I don't have to touch is really nice, and that I know that is easy for the reps to handle, and that and I can trust that that's happening. The reporting is very easy, and that's really nice, just to go in and run a report whenever I want and be able to see things pretty easily. And the integration with Salesforce, that piece is crucial. We couldn't have a reference program that didn't speak directly to Salesforce and be able to have that information then stored within those individual accounts. It's so important. And then finally, and I know I mentioned it, but our sales rep is just amazing. So yeah, that level of
Fantastic.
customer service. Yeah.
You mentioned Salesforce. As
Mm-hmm.
I understand it, ReferenceEdge is native to
Mm-hmm.
Salesforce.
It is.
What is the benefit of that?
This is like out of my scope of understanding of like, why is it so important? I'm not sure, other than it works really well together.
All right,
And that's all I need to
perfect.
need at
Yeah,
this point.
exactly. That's all we all care about in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one final question, and
Yeah.
that is, what kind of advice would you have to people that are listening to today's webinar?
Oh, well, if my advice, if you're listening today, if you do not have a formalized reference program, if you are tracking references on Excel spreadsheets, for example, or just hoping that your reps are going to do the right thing and not overburden their customers with reference calls, it's never too early to start a program. Even if you have 5 reference customers, that the sooner you put in a process in place and you educate your field around why it's important and what we're all going to get from this, and how a reference program can grow and benefit everybody, and um, that philosophy of reference selling, the sooner you can make that a part of your company's DNA, the better for everyone. So I would just say it's never too late to start one, but I don't think it's ever too early either.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We've been listening and talking with Estelle Hayes. She's the Senior Manager, Customer Marketing for VMware. Estelle, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been great having you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Nancy.